Good morning, sir. I am Marvin James C. Morano, and we are the Group 6 Colreg 72 Rule 18 to 19. So, we're gonna tackle about the rule number 18. Um, a power-driven vessel's underway shall keep out of the way of number 1, a vessel's not under command. Number 2, a vessel is restricted in her ability to maneuver. Number 3, a vessel engaged in fishing. Number 4, a sailing vessel. And the next one is B, a sailing vessel's underway shall keep out of the way of number 1, a vessel's not under command. Number 2, a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. Number 3, a vessel engaged in fishing. So let's move on to the next rule.
Colreg 72 Rule 18. C. A vessel engaged in fishing vessel when underway shall so far as possible avoid the following. First, a vessel not under command. Second, a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver. D. Number 1. Any vessel other than vessel not under command or a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, avoid impeding the safe passage of a vessel constrained by her draught, exhibiting signal rule number 28. D. Number 2. A vessel constrained by her draught shall navigate with particular caution, having a full regard on her special circumstances. E. A seaplane on a water shall, in general, keep well clear of all vessels and avoid impeding the navigation. In circumstances, however, where risk of all collision exists, she shall comply with the rule of this part. F. Number 1. A WIG craft shall, when taking off and landing in flight near the surface, keep away and clear of any vessel, avoid impeding their navigation. F. Number 2. A WIG craft operating on the water surface shall comply with the rules of this part and the power-driven vessel. The rule Colreg 72 Rule 18 simply tells us that we should avoid impeding any other vessel when we have a special condition to avoid collision and avoid accidents in the sea.
So in this diagram we've got a power-driven vessel approaching a vessel constrained by a draft, which is the container ship. Now we've seen that the power-driven vessel has to avoid impeding the safe passage of the constrained by a draft. The exact things that she has to do is clarified in Rule 8, but she's going to come round very early, allow the constrained by a draft to continue without having to deviate a course, and then she's going to come back and pass well clear astern. If we come back though to the start of this, and just let the power-driven vessel run on a little bit, Rule 8 actually says as soon as risk of collision exists, the constrained by a draft needs to comply with the rules as she would anyway, which means this would be a crossing situation still, and the constrained by a draft would have to keep out of the way of the power-driven vessel. Now, being constrained by a draft, she cannot really deviate from the course she is following, otherwise she wouldn't be constrained by a draft, so her only option is to slow right down and let the power-driven vessel pass clear ahead. Of course, the power-driven vessel is in the wrong here. They should have come round and avoided impeding the safe passage, but under the collision regulations, the CBD remains the give-way vessel and must give way still.
Good day everyone, I am Angelo Obregoso and my assigned topic is Colreg 72 Rule 19, Conduct of Vessel in Restricted Visibility. So letter A, This rule applies to vessels not in sight of one another when navigating in or near of area restricted visibility. Meaning that this rule applies that such vessels that may be close to each other but cannot visually see each other. So, so electronic device and sound signals will be the only possible means of detection, and thus the action would be taken would not be visible by the other vessel. So letter B. Every vessel shall proceed at safe speed, adapt to prevailing circumstances and condition of restricted visibility. A power-driven vessel shall have her engines ready for immediately maneuver. So in restricted visibility, we have to proceed safe speed. Always have your engine ready for immediately maneuver, so that all option of so that all option to avoid collision are available. So letter C. Every vessel shall have due regard to the prevailing circumstances and due and condition of restricted visibility when complying with the rule of section 1 of part. So we should be mindful of what will be the actions, or what will be the activities in restricted visibility. So that's all.
So letter D. A vessel which detects by a radar alone the presence of another vessel shall determine if a close quarters situation is developing and or a risk of collision exists. If so, she shall take overtaking action in ample time, provided that when such action consists of an alteration of course, so far as possible, the following shall be avoided. So, it means be rather alone, you detect that a closer quarter situation is developing, a risk of collision exists. Take avoiding action in ample time. Here some following shall be avoided. 1. An alteration of course to port of a vessel forward of a beam other than a vessel being overtaken. So it is mean that in restricted visibility, when the vessel cannot see each other as required by the rules, the above are to be complied with. 2. An alteration of course towards above vessel abeam or above the beam. So it is mean also here's to since the vessel are not in sight of one another and the observation of being carried out of electronic means the proper assessment of the aspect of the vessel is not obtained as such above the guidelines. Next, letter E. Except where it has been determined that a risk of collision does not exist, every vessel hears apparently forward of her beam the fog signal of another vessel, or which cannot avoid a close quarter situation with another vessel forward her beam, shall reduce her speed to the minimum at which she can be kept on her course. She shall necessarily take all her way off, and any event navigate with extreme caution until danger of
or collision is over. The point of this, reduce her speed to the minimum at which she can be. That is.
So here example of rule number 19.
A couple of examples. So this time we're going to be looking at a radar plot. Of course we can't do a normal situation because we cannot see the other vessel. It's all going to be on the radar screen. For ease of reference, I'm going to divide our screen into 4 sectors. Of course, everything forward of the beam is in the top 2 halves and everything abaft the beam is in the bottom 2 halves. Right, so what happens if we detect a target out on the starboard side? It's forward of the beam and it's out to starboard. We've got to make an alteration of course to starboard because we need to avoid an alteration of course to port for a vessel forward of the beam. Likewise, if it's out on the port side forward of the beam, getting closer still, we've got to alter our course to starboard because we need to avoid an alteration of course to port. And then if the target is astern of us, this time out on the port quarter, again we'd alter away from it because we need to avoid an alteration of course towards it. So we alter to starboard again. And then the final quarter, out on the starboard quarter, if it's getting closer to us, we need to alter away from it. So this time we're going to come round to port. So this is the only one where we actually come to port. The rest of them we need to come to starboard. So we can have a look at all these together. Wherever the target is, unless it's out behind the beam on the starboard side, we need to alter our course to starboard. And if it's on our starboard quarter, we need to alter our course to port. Of course, the exception is if we're overtaking. So all this implies we have to do a radar plot, we need to determine everything, and if that tells us we are overtaking the vessel, then we're allowed to come to port for it if it's forward of the beam. So paragraph D.